Welcome to Earth's Mightiest Weirdos. It is Monday night, which means it's Marvel night here on This Diz Life podcast network. We look a little bit different than we've looked in times past, but first and foremost, we are still welcoming back the man, the legend, Piano Rob. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I am hanging in there. Loki ended wonderfully. I cannot wait to talk about it. We've been talking a ton of Marvel. If you have seen Black Widow and have not listened to our Black Widow spoiler review, then what are you waiting for? It is found on the United We fan feed and the Earth's Mightiest Weirdos feed. Welcoming back to the show for her second appearance, we have Cara joining us. Cara, how are you doing?
Hello, everyone. I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Good. We're happy to have you. Mark are taking the night off. I'm having a hard time getting the chat to show up on the screen. So if we don't, I'll just pull them up as normal. But David's here. Rob says, share the stream, baby. Let's talk some Marvel. So we'll try that again here in a little bit. Welcoming to the show the very first time, but she has been on United We Fan before, specifically talking, it was in our Black Cinema episode. We talked mostly about Black Panther within that episode. We talked about a few other films as well. Maya, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bryan. Thanks for having me.
Maya, it's good to have you. And then his first time on the show from the Comics and Cinema podcast. Joining us from across the country, we have Alex. How are you doing, Alex?
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Alex is definitely our resident comic guy. So if we have any questions about the Council of Kangs or anything like that, we're coming to you, Alex. So just be ready for it. So Mark says that the chat will pop up in a second. We just have to leave it up. There we go. We are seeing it now. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Well, let's get right into it because we've got a ton to talk about. We try to keep this as close to an hour as we can. That's going to be really difficult to do tonight, but we will do the best that we can. But I want to get some of our first reactions from people that have not yet had their chance to share it. So Maya, what were your thoughts specifically on Loki and the existence of this series before we even got an episode?
Yeah, I think most of y'all know that I was not a Loki fan before the series. It was actually my least. I was more excited for Hawkeye than for the Loki series. To be 100% honest, was not a huge fan of the character. I felt like they would always kill him off. There was no stakes with his character. But I have been 100% converted. I absolutely love the series. I felt like the story just very much resonated with me. And it's just a beautiful thing that I can just have my whole thought process around the character change just from 6 episodes. So wasn't a fan beforehand, but I didn't know what I was getting myself into clearly.
What weren't you a fan of?
Well, you just never. Like, with most movies, we see Loki die, and he always comes back. And but granted, like most people like interpret that he's the god of mischief, like, you know, that I guess that's normal. But for me, I just felt like constantly killing him never added anything to the story for me. So I just felt just someone who just won't leave the story. I guess that's the best way I can put it. It just felt like his characters didn't hold any stakes for me. So that's why I wasn't a huge fan of him before the series.
That's fair. I did see a funny meme that left us from that, and it said all this because Hulk had to take the stairs. Alex, what were your thoughts of Loki before we even got an episode? Were you excited for it, or were you more looking forward to the Hawkeye series like Maya?
You know, maybe I was a little bit just because Haley Steinfeld, but I actually was in that same boat as Maya. I am not a huge Loki fan either, just for that exact same reason. He's always seemed like kind of like the cockroach that won't die sort of thing, and I've just never been a huge fan of him, but I was excited for the show. Because I had some thoughts, obviously nothing concrete of like, oh, this is probably going to be a show that will set some things up. I had no idea what it would be, but that at least had me interested in it. But I certainly wasn't, I was more excited for WandaVision than this. But now, you know, now it's completely different.
We are going to compare series at the end because I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are. Cara, we talked about it a little bit the last time that you were on. So more so jumping into after we saw the first 5 episodes, especially that 5th episode that we spent in the void, where were you standing headed into the finale?
Yeah, I mean, each and every episode of this show has been very different. So I had no idea what was coming. I had absolutely no idea that it was going to set it up to be the next stage of the MCU as a whole. I thought it would play some part in it, but definitely nothing like this. So I'm times 10 the excitement from what I was last time.
That's fair. The last time you were on was after the 3rd episode, and I still, now having seen the series in full, that episode sticks out like a sore thumb for me personally. But I'm still excited to go back through and watch this series. But Rob, I want to play a sound clip from last week because of how you reacted to episode 5. Neither you or I could join. You were doing Piano Rob famous man things, and I was simply just enjoying a week in upstate New York and going to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and it was amazing. But Rob, you called in and left a voicemail on the show, and I'm going to play that right now because you nailed it, sir.
What's up, guys? It's Piano Rob. I'm sorry I couldn't make the show tonight, but just real quick, if it is not a Loki variant that is in charge of the TVA, another little theory I had, and I could be totally wrong on every one of these, it could be Immortus. If you look up your Marvel history, Immortus is basically a variant of Kang the Conqueror that is obsessed with making sure the timeline stays intact, that he always ends up in power. So it might be a nice way to introduce Kang without actually introducing the main villain Kang that we're going to get in that Ant-Man and Wasp movie. So I don't know if I'm right. Maybe we'll find out Wednesday. I'll see you guys soon.
The second I saw the man show on the screen, your face is the first thing that I saw in my mind. Well, I love that you qualified if it's not a Loki variant, because I think most of us were betting on King Loki kind of running the show. But Rob, hands down, man, you nailed it. Congratulations.
Thank you. I had to get something right at some point after all this Mephisto stuff for a year.
That's fair. Well, let's get into how good he was in that and just the series in general. But Alex, I'm going to throw the first thing to you. The opening sequence was full of quotes from our sacred timeline. It opens with Anthony Mackie, or I apologize, Sam Wilson saying "way to go, Tic Tac," and everything that came from the MCU before it. And then it kind of peeled back, and we got Maya Angelou and Nelson Mandela and How Dare They from Greta Thunberg, if that's not how you say her last name, I'm sorry, but it kind of set up this whole sacred timeline and then moved us along. What did you make of that? I still don't understand it.
Yeah, that's might be one of my favorite parts of the entire episode, just because I've never seen something like that before, and 100% my favorite opening for an MCU property of anything, just because of how unique it is, all the callbacks. The way that I looked at it was...
Stan Lee at the beginning of Captain Marvel would like a word.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
Just the opening, the Marvel sequence with Stan Lee at the beginning of Captain Marvel.
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. But so, like, as I was watching it, though, I loved the way that they did it, at least on my first viewing and a couple of others as well. I really took it as, like, this is them saying everything that you know, everything from the MCU is all contained in this universe. And look at this, we even have other universes that we're looking at, because it pulls out from space, and then you get the wormhole, and then there's a second one, and then as more quotes are coming, you're zoomed into that. And I think it kind of was showing that, like, all of these different worlds, all of these different timelines, they're all on one timeline, and they're all going through this sacred timeline right now. So it's like everything we've seen up to this point is a properly pruned timeline.
Yeah, Mark says, is that the sacred timeline in the background? That is absolutely why we chose the background that we're running with tonight. Cara, I saw you nodding along vigorously, saying that this is your favorite Marvel Studios opening. What did you make of it?
That was my favorite part of this whole series, actually, was that little opening with everybody's comments, all these comments that have meant so much to us over the last, 10, 12 years. Like, I had full body goosebumps. There was tears in my eyes. I was like, this is so emotional. This is amazing. And then, yeah, like you said, then the second, third watch, I realized, okay, they're actually throwing in some other stuff in here. What's going on? And then Vision saying, what is grief, or what is, grief if not love persevering, was in a different timeline than the rest of them. So then I was like, okay, was that whole WandaVision show in a different timeline? And now I'm just confused. But I loved every piece of it.
Yeah, this is what makes me nervous about the multiverse. Is I'm going to be able to keep it straight. And if you don't think you can keep the multiverse straight, hit that subscribe button to Earth's Mightiest Weirdos wherever you find your podcast. This is Life YouTube channel. We will be here to help you keep it straight. Maya, what did you make of this opening sequence?
Like everyone else, I love this, and I really like that they included like quotes from the MCU, but you don't really, when I hear quotes from other like MCU properties, I don't think of a timeline or the passage of time. I just think of the characters that were saying it. So when you incorporate historical figures, I felt like it really grounds you in time moving and passing through. So I really liked that. And I liked how they, at first, they went from just MCU quotes to just like historical figures, and then they moved to like a mix of both. And like the last part of that sequence. So I thought it was really cool, and the visuals were amazing. I mean, I thought it was like with Alex, I think this is my favorite opening in the MCU.
It's the second time in 5 days that we got the MCU kind of grounding itself in our real world, because when Black Widow, like we had Dreykov pictures with Bill Clinton and all those kinds of things. Like it's placing the MCU in our timeline, and it's not something. I mean, it always kind of has done that, but it's never really done that to that extent. So that's pretty interesting. Moshi's joining us. Moshi says that he believes that it's Immortus that we saw at the end. He thinks it's Immortus that's the statue at the end. I don't know if I agree with that, the way I'm seeing that. Maybe. I mean, I suppose it's possible they're all variants of Kangs. Andrea says that it was a great opening, that it was a part of history. David says, I think that we're going to get the same or similar lines from What If that were spoken by different characters. That's very possible. But Rob, I didn't go to you on what you made of this opening scene, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I loved it. Fun fact about me, I watch it once through, but then every other time I put the captions on, so the closed captions, so I don't miss anything. I think exactly what you guys said. They put real life stuff in there because it makes it more real. It's that simple. They put the quotes. It's showing that that's all a part of the same thing. And now that at the end of this episode, all of that exists, but so much more exists. That's what's going to be amazing about this. I don't think I need to add anything. You guys covered it.
Then keep going, Rob. We get to Sylvie. They get to the door of the Citadel. She stops and she thinks before she kicks the door in. She gets a little bit nervous.
God knows all the emotions that are going through her at that point. What we got to realize with her, as opposed to even Loki, she's been dealing with this since she was a child. And we don't really know how old Sylvie is. They never really said that. Like, we look at her and maybe she's in her 30s or whatever it is, but she could have lived for hundreds and hundreds of years going.
Yeah, Loki's 1500, and she does say in the episode she's older than him. So
yes, so this has been a very, very long time, and I think that's the first thing people have to realize. Like, this isn't like even like a 30-year thing, which would be major. This could be thousands of years that she's been waiting for this moment. So of course this is a big thing. What that's huge. That's huge. That's why she hesitated.
Alex, did you have something there?
Yeah, no, I felt the same way, and I think that comment that she makes to Loki was pretty big, and especially the second thing that she says too, because she's kind of like asking him to maybe give her some advice, but the minute he even opens his mouth, she just immediately interrupts him and is like, actually, no, I'm older than you, all this stuff. So it's like she's looking for the advice, but doesn't really want it because she knows what she wants to do. She's just nervous to do it.
It's foreshadowing to the line that we get later in the episode 2 where Loki says, "You can't trust, and I can't be trusted." I thought that was one of the best lines from the show. They go in the door and we stare, and she doesn't even have to kick the door in. The door opens for them. We're staring into the void. And if you've seen the meme, it's wonderful, of the little girl in the back seat watching Wreck-It Ralph. And then all of a sudden Miss Minutes pops up on her iPad screen and she screams. Miss Minutes shows up and scares the poop out of everybody. But Maya, she offers them a deal to be reinserted back into the sacred timeline, to win the Battle of New York, and to be together. And neither of them really, entertain it for very long, at least.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I screamed when I saw the scene. It was terrifying. But I thought this was interesting because, especially looking at later down the line in the episode, her and Kang are offering something different in terms of like ways to get out of the current situation they were in. And so I remember just being a little confused, like, wow, Miss Minutes is offering this, Kang is offering this. Like, is this just another tactic just to see, like, how much they can try to control the Lokis? But it was an interesting scene just to see her in like a new environment outside of the TVA.
Yeah, she looks a little different when she's lit by the hue of the brown and orange lights that they have in the TVA for sure. Cara, what did you make of Miss Minutes offering this last ditch effort of He Who Remains to get him out of there?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting just because later on he tells us, like, I already know what's happening. I already know everything. So if he already knows that they're not going to take the deal, like, I don't know why they tried. Maybe just to break them down a little bit before they went in there, kind of like a warm-up gig before he did the big reveal, I guess. But yeah, I mean, good for them for not taking it. Shows us how much Loki has actually grown in this series.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know how much time has passed in this series because time passes differently for Loki and in the TVA. Dwayne brings up a good point that there was a report directly. Kevin Feige said it, that they had a board meeting on a whiteboard and they were writing down the rules of the multiverse. We're already delving into the multiverse at the very minimum with Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but this multiverse thing is here to stay. Kevin says between Miss Minutes, the jump scare, and Dead Vision, Marvel is getting us ready for the Multiverse of Madness, which Elizabeth Olsen has come out and said that it's the scariest thing by a lot that Marvel's ever done. I know Cara is super, super thrilled about that.
Bryan, let me just jump in for what Cara said, though, too. He
Yeah.
didn't know if they were going to take the deal. They reached that threshold where he didn't know what was going to happen anymore. So he didn't know what was going to happen at a certain point in that episode.
You think they'd reached the threshold that early? I do not. I think they reached the threshold. I think he's telling the truth when he says he knew everything up until 8, 6, 7, 10 seconds ago.
Yes, but that's what I mean. He didn't know if they were going to take the deal because he could only see that far.
Yeah, he could only see till then.
The decision wasn't made until after, by Sylvie.
Rob, we're going to start with you. He Who Remains is revealed. It is not Immortus necessarily, but it is at least, at the very minimum, a variant of Kang the Conqueror, played by none other than the same actor who's playing Kang the Conqueror in Quantumania, in Jonathan Majors.
So first of all, according to something I read with the director, they did not know if they could get Jonathan Majors. That ended up being a great thing that they were able to add him. It was a great way to introduce him because now when we do see Kang in the future, it will be Jonathan Majors, but it might not be exactly the same way he acted here. I'm assuming it's going to be a much more evil version, as he said, wait until you meet our variants. Personally, I love that he's here, but we might as well say this now. If you are a casual fan, a lot of the casual fans I've spoken to, my own girlfriend, she didn't like how it ended because they don't know who this person is. They have no idea. It was one of the first times I feel Marvel really gave you a whole finale with a brand new character. So if you were trying to figure it out or follow along, it was Agatha all along, at least you can go back and rewatch it. This guy, to a casual viewer, just shows up in the finale. So I understand as a casual viewer if you're confused a little bit, but when you replay this a couple of years down the line, this is going to really be a wonderful, wonderful thing that they added him now, because everything's going to explode from this point forward.
Yeah, I read the same interview with Kate Herron, who was the director of this series, and she's not returning for season 2, which I find interesting, and we'll talk about that. The only thing I would say against that is with WandaVision, you can go back through, you can track Agatha throughout the episode. That was a series finale. This is very much a season finale, and we don't know how much of Kang variants that we're going to get in future seasons. I hope Jonathan Majors returns. He was absolutely brilliant in this episode, and we'll talk a lot more about it. I can see some of the criticism, and to steal a term from the MCU Fan Show podcast, Sean Gerber puts it was very Owen Wilson talky. But the talking was just so dang good. Alex, I don't know if you're ready to speak on this, and by all means, throw it right back at me if you're not, but he talks about how in the 31st century, that this is where basically the Council of Kangs kind of came together, and he was one of them, and he kind of came out on top.
Yeah, so, and I don't know how much they're going to translate it to the MCU as the same. I'm not as familiar with the Council of Kangs as I am of the Council of Reeds which is essentially, I think, kind of the same thing, but you're getting all of the variants of all of the different people together. And at the same time, you think, like he says, they're very polite to each other, but they all have their own kind of secrets beneath it because they're all the same person and they're all that way. So eventually that sort of thing just doesn't last, and there's a cataclysm with it. And so it's the same for like Kangs, it's the same for the Reeds. And it's funny too that it's also the same as like the Council of Ricks in Rick and Morty, and the show's, kind of relies heavily on Rick and Morty as well. But it's really fascinating because that was what I thought when I'd first seen him too, when he started talking about, there's going to be more of me. I was just like, this is great. We're going to get 1 million Jonathan Majors now in the MCU, and that'll be fantastic. But I love the way that they set up. They really leaned into some of those comic origins of multiple Kangs, which I thought was really brave of them to do for the first reveal of him. Like, you're getting Kang, Immortus, He Who Remains, who's technically not Kang, but I just loved how they kind of meshed them all together.
Yeah, and Michael Waldron, when you talk about Rick and Morty, Michael Waldron's the head writer of this show. He's the head writer of season 2. He's also writing Kevin Feige's produced Star Wars film, and he's from Rick and Morty. Like, that's one of the things on his resume. It's got a lot of Rick and Morty weirdness to it. Mindy is in the comments and she says, is Sylvie in a relationship with a Kang variant and that's why she hesitated? I don't think so at all. I don't think Sylvie's had any relationships with anybody because that's just who her personality is. I think she hesitated because I think she just had that doubt in her mind that what if he is telling the truth, the thing Loki was trying to get her to stop and think about. Moshi asks, why is Loki in a different timeline when he got transported before Kang was killed? We're going to talk about that, Moshi, when it comes up in the timeline of the episode, because it's one of the most important things that came out of this episode. Maya, I know you were excited to see Jonathan Majors, and we talk about somebody. Why would Jonathan Majors jump into something so crazy as the MCU? Or now, it's still the MCU. We're not going to call it the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. Like, it's still the Marvel Cinematic Universe because we're going to continue with that. But Jonathan Majors, he's going to play so many different versions of the same character. He can really stretch his acting. And the same is what I expect from Oscar Isaac in Moon Knight, where he's going to play Mark Spector, who's got multiple personalities in Moon Knight. He's going to get to be so many different characters all within the same body. And I think it's really, really cool. And Jonathan Majors is going to get to do that. But like I said, Maya, I know you were excited to see Jonathan Majors show up on screen.
Yeah, huge Lovecraft Country fan. And I saw him in the Five Bloods, and his acting is just amazing. I'm like, he's definitely the right person for this type of role. And I screamed because I was not I almost, just obviously with the nature of all of us talking about this, I knew it was a possibility to see him since a lot of people were talking about it. And there was actually an interview when they asked him directly, like, are you going to show up in Loki? And obviously he,
yeah, he just said, I don't know.
So just knowing that was that could be a possibility was really exciting. But just seeing him, that first reveal, it definitely felt like a WandaVision, Agatha basement scene a little bit. I thought that was really cool. But again, I really love that scene. I do see what you're saying, Rob, about a casual viewer may think being really confused, learning a new character. But I think that the talky part of him explaining all the different Kangs, the variants, and how they're learning the same things, and some of them are not as benevolent and things of that. I think that really helped ground us in his character, even though we don't have much of an understanding of who he is. So I really liked the dialogue there, and I think that was an amazing reveal for his character.
And they don't have to waste time doing that in a movie now. That's another genius thing about these TV shows. They can go right into the action. We don't need more of an origin.
Mm-hmm.
Sebastian says he loves Lovecraft Country as well. He didn't love how it ended, and it is officially the end. They're not getting renewed. But we got two actors from it, Jonathan Majors, and then the actress that plays Hunter B-15. I apologize that I don't know her name.
Wunmi Musaku.
Thank you. So Cara, we're gonna start with you on this next one. Well, I guess I didn't give you a chance to. How did you experience He Who Remains and Jonathan Majors showing up before we move on?
Yeah, so I've never seen him before. So that was a total surprise. I knew who he was as soon as he came on the screen. I was like, yes, it's Kang. I was so excited about it, which it may or may not be Kang. But I thought he was amazing. He looked like he had an absolute blast playing this character, and I'm sure he's going to have so much fun playing something else, like a different version of it.
Two things that Kate Herron said in that same interview that Rob talked about. One is they let him completely improvise when he jumps on the table, hence you're welcome. All of that was completely improvised from Jonathan Majors. And two, he was the voice of all three of the Timekeeper animatronics as well, which is nice. Really, really cool. They're really warping his voice. I thought that was really neat. But Cara, we jump back to the TVA. Mobius kind of gets the reckoning that he wanted, but Renslayer is far more capable. Mobius ends up back on the floor. She's still chasing after the mission. She just got documents from Miss Minutes saying that he thinks that these would be more valuable. We officially get confirmation that she had no idea about He Who Remains, because she says, who's he? But Cara, she takes a temp pad. She says she's going in search of free will. Where do you think she went?
Not a clue.
Okay.
No idea. I think maybe she went to find the Citadel that they're at the end of time, but I have no idea.
Villain or hero, if you had to guess?
That she's a villain or a hero? Yeah. I think she's a villain.
Okay. Because it turns out the TVA may not be so bad after all. Alex, where do you think Judge Renslayer went?
Yeah, it took me a couple of watches, but I think she's going to get Kang again because, time is a circle, obviously, in the way that they're describing it. And he says, I'm just going to end up being back here. But when she says that the one in charge is the only one that gets free will, and then she says, I'm going to go search for free will, I think she's saying, I'm going to go search for the one in charge. And I wouldn't be surprised if part of his plan was, hey, Miss Minutes, send a little note to Renslayer to go find me in case I die, because I don't know what happens after the inflection point or whatever that is. So I wouldn't be surprised if she chased after her. That's what happens in the comics as well. She's very close with Kang. And if you read some of the stuff, it's pretty wild how close they are doing it too. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's just going to find the younger version of Kang.
Yeah, that would make a ton of sense. Sebastian says Jonathan Majors is also one of the sexiest men alive. So, that jumped off screen, Sebastian. You are absolutely correct. Dwayne says still thinks she has records from the original Sacred Timeline and maybe influenced Kang getting back in charge. She had her briefcase with her. She could have taken with her during this same time. Hunter B-15 has taken Hunter U-92, D-90, several of them. She's shown him that Judge Renslayer is a variant. She was a principal at Franklin Delano Roosevelt High School in Ohio in 2018. Maya, did you go to high school at FDR High School?
No, not at all. But I'm loving all the love the MCU's giving Ohio. Ohio, 1995, year I was born in Black Widow. And then she was a professor at Ohio State she got her degree from Ohio State and diploma.
The Ohio State.
Yeah, the Ohio State. So I love seeing all of that.
Mindy says that she asked about the wrong person with Renslayer, talking about the relationship with Kang, not Sylvie. That makes a lot more sense. Yes, I do believe that there's some sort of maybe not romantic, but definitely some sort of relationship between there. But we're going to move on. And Rob, we're going to start there with you. He Who Remains describes the multiversal war, 31st century. They all started discovering each other. It was described pretty much exactly how Miss Minutes described it to us in the first episode.
Yeah, I believe that's pretty much, that is true. I don't think, the way Loki said it, I don't think he's lying about this. It's just, we, even as people now, we don't know the secrets of the universe. Even Sylvie didn't know the secrets of the universe. This is somebody who knew more, and she didn't want to trust him, but I believe that's exactly what happened. There was peace for a while, but peace doesn't last because people, gods, whatever, they naturally want power. That's what's going to happen. We're going to get more and more power, and they're going to do whatever they have to take control. And I also love the way they said Eliath was basically born out of this chaos, and he found a way to control it. So what's really kind of funny is this version of Kang, I didn't necessarily view as a villain, but that's what Marvel does best. Like, he was truly, I think, trying to keep things in a certain order. Did that order benefit him, not benefit him? Possibly, but free will also does lead to a little bit of sense of chaos. So the whole thing was interesting how he described it. I think he covered it well.
Whether it benefited him or not, I personally believe him when he talks about how it benefits mankind the most, because the devils that they unleashed in millions and millions of them. I mean, that sacred timeline is not a sacred timeline whatsoever after she kills him. And even before then, it started branching. But Alex, what did you make of this multiversal war description?
Yeah, I loved it. That whole bit was amazing. I mean, I loved it just as much as the first time in the first episode. I think there's a lot of pieces there too. Do you want to live at the end of time by yourself, holed up in an office with nothing going on in your entire life? Like, I wouldn't want that. So maybe he isn't that bad of a guy, that he's just trying to keep things in order. Or maybe there's a lot that we don't know. But I did feel like he was telling the truth. I loved the little drawing thing that he's got, the pad with seeing actual Kangs on there, like the costumes, and then seeing Goliath. Like, that whole bit was so good. I think we'll talk about it as it goes, but like the CGI in this episode was phenomenal.
Bringing Goliath back into it in that manner made a ton of sense. It made the entire last episode just... the fifth episode's amazing. Still probably my favorite episode of the series, looking back on all 6 of them. But that Goliath, the way he talked about that and why it's in the void and what purpose it has, was really, really cool. David talks about, Judge Renslayer says, whether as a principal or of a high school or a judge, she's clearly attracted to power or power positions. She's going to find a Kang variant in charge. That would make a lot of sense. Dwayne says, didn't this version of Kang just do what Doctor Strange did? This is the best option of all options. It's a pretty decent way to think about it. Cara, what did you think of this description of the multiversal war and just Jonathan Majors and everything he was able to do in this scene?
It kind of reminded me a little bit of Thanos, who like truly believed that in removing half the universe, he was doing something good that benefited other people, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was going about it in the right way. I kind of had the same feeling with this one. Like, even if he was benefiting the universe, like, he may or may not, like, obviously they were still killing a ton of people, so it wasn't like it wasn't the best.
Well, and that's a perfect segue. We're going to throw this to Maya. He says, we're all villains here. Like, we've all done horrific things, but now you have a chance to do them for a good reason. Makes a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah, he definitely does. And it's really hard to see him as a true villain because of that. And there's so many different considerations on how to go forward. And yeah, like whoever put that in the chat about like a Doctor Strange type scenario, this being the best one, you know, I mean, he clearly has more information than a lot of people. So it's interesting to kind of like see that dilemma and then that being put into the Loki's hands. But something that interesting about this scene is like the whole threshold thing. And granted, it could just be, you know, a convenient thing. Like, okay, at this certain point, when we meet, I'm not able to have any control anymore. For some reason, I just couldn't sit with that. Like, why that moment? Why then? In that way, is that going to happen to other Kangs we see in the future, where they have a point where they all kind of like lose their power, or lose this all-knowing, I guess, control? And I'm just curious to kind of see how that, if these types of thresholds happen with other Kang characters or variants. So that was the only like question mark for me. And like, why then, why now type of scenario.
Alex, how about you? We're all villains here.
Yeah, I agree with Cara too in terms of it being very Thanos-y. It's a very interesting argument, though. This is probably one of the best philosophical arguments you could have with somebody of like, okay, do you want to keep everything going as is, where everyone is safe and happy, but know that these terrible things are happening behind the scenes, or create total chaos, allow free will? We don't know when the Kangs are going to show up. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 100 years, but you're risking a very big thing. So I loved that. And I loved him kind of, you know, calling that out when Sylvie's complaining about it, of like, you killed people too. Like, you know, who knows how many people Sylvie's killed? Probably a lot. And so has Loki too. So kind of getting them all in the same room like that was great, and a great call out.
And Sylvie constantly thinks of herself as not the villain whatsoever. And,
Yeah, right.
and she was like, she, at least at times, the first 2 episodes we met her, she killed dozens of people that she knew were variants, that she knew were actual, like, not creations of the TVA. Rob, what do you got here?
I'm going to become the villain of this show right now when I say what I'm going to say. we want to believe in a perfect world we can save everybody. We see it every day in the world. But what if somebody told you what's the best case real scenario? It's the scenario where you can save the most people. You can't save all people. People are going to be upset about it. That's a real life argument that we have in the real world every day, which is why it's so amazing to see it in this show. We don't know what the best case scenario is. This guy seems to have more knowledge than anybody else we've seen in the Marvel universe yet. He knows more about how the universe goes than everybody. So if he says we're going to prune a person here and there, but this is how we're going to save the most people, that's the best case scenario. Is it the perfect scenario? No, but that's real life. There is no perfect scenario. There's not enough, as Thanos said, there's not enough resources, or there's not enough this. If other variants of himself are going to cause more destruction, well, then that's going to be worse. But even somebody, Sylvie, who has lived for probably thousands of years, even she's not okay with that because she wants to save her or fix her story or her own. But that might destroy even more people's stories. So it's what's going to benefit the greater good is the thing. So the villain, I find, even in the real world, is the person who says that. If you're the person willing to say, we can't save everybody, you're the bad guy. We want the person that's going to save everybody, and it's not real.
And this is where Jonathan Major's performance really jumped off the screen for me, is when he starts yelling at her to grow up, that it's not personal and it's practical. It was so good. And she couldn't look beyond her own personal experience. And to Loki's credit, he did. Dwayne says that the writing for this episode was amazing. Was there really a right answer in the end? Welcome to real life. Absolutely. And we are going to be dealing with those real life consequences for a while. David says that the threshold is the first opportunity that Sylvie and Loki have to exercise free will, and they don't exercise that free will in the same manner. Cara, I see you shaking your head. Sylvie will not stop and think about what she just heard.
Yeah, this really frustrated me, and I felt similar to when Star-Lord was banging on Thanos, and you just knew, like, just stop for a second. Don't make this about you. There's everybody else is like going to be affected by this. Just calm down for 2 seconds. He couldn't do it, and then Thanos won. So I felt that frustration exactly the same way in this scene when Loki's just trying to get her to calm down and think for a second. Like, I was very much in our main Tom Hiddleston Loki's camp of like, calm down for a second, and like, she really made me mad by not doing that.
I referenced it earlier, the when he says you can't trust and I can't be trusted. To say that this kiss hit me in the same manner as to when Rey and Kylo Ren kissed at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, maybe just a little bit. But this one, she used it very manipulatively to get to that tempad, to get Loki out of there. But Maya, were you as frustrated as Cara was when Sylvie just wouldn't think about anybody but herself?
Absolutely. In my notes, I was like, almost like, if not worse than Star-Lord, because she had so much more evidence in front of her, and I just felt like there was like an easier way to, or there was an opportunity and a good case for her to just stop and think, but she just didn't do it. But like to Rob's point earlier, thousands and thousands of years chasing one thing, her judgment is clouded beyond anything we can probably realize. So it was very frustrating, but I also see why she did it. And obviously we need to have some sort of conflict and chaos to set up other, properties. So I guess I'm just in for the ride, but I was very frustrated watching that scene.
Rob, was frustration the right word for you too?
Yeah, frustration was the right word, but I'm also getting used to it in a lot of these movies. They let characters go on emotion and they make emotional decisions. And I don't like it. I understand it, but she had her mind made up. He took away free will, therefore he's the villain. I'm killing this guy. It doesn't matter what he said. She was killing him. I hate it, but it happened.
Alex.
Yeah, so, I was in the exact same boat. To me, it was a very Willy Wonka-esque scene that they get to the very end of the line, and he's like, I'm giving you this. Like, I'm going to let you run the TVA for free, basically. And it was like, oh, wow. And when that happened, I got so excited. I was like, hell yeah, I know what season 2 is going to be about. Like, them going to timelines, awesome. And then she kills him, and I was like, wait, what? But then I'm thinking about it, and I was like, as a fan, we have to be Team Sylvie, because if you were Team Loki, we don't get all of the cool characters that come from the other multiverses. We don't get a big Kang war that brings every Avenger from every timeline in, like the stuff that you see in the comics. Like, you have to be Team Sylvie, but in the moment you're like, no. So it's like you go through all these emotions as you're watching it. It's amazing.
Those dozen fans of Jamie Foxx's Blue Electro are just
yes.
Yes, he's not going to be blue this time around. David, the Blurred Hulk himself is here. He says the kiss was manipulation by Sylvie to achieve her self-imposed purpose. Absolutely. I completely agree. Like I said, when she kissed him, I wasn't overly thrilled. And then to see why she did it and why she turned him made a ton of sense. So Dwayne says, but did she think of someone else by sending Loki? Did she think of someone else by sending Loki away? I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about her sending Loki away here in just a second. Actually right now. So Alex, we'll start right there with you. She sends Loki back to the TVA. We assume the regular TVA, and we'll talk about the repercussions of that here in just a minute. And she stares him right in the eye, and she kills He Who Remains, and he doesn't resist at all.
Yeah, but maybe one of the best lines in the episode when it's kind of the whole conversation, right, of her being like, aren't you going to beg for your life? And he's like, oh, good. Yeah, like, let's play this up. And then she doesn't even she just whoop in, and it was like, oh, wow. And he says, see you soon. And I was like, oh, that's so good. And then we got probably, like I've said this a couple of times, my favorite CGI in the whole MCU of that pan out to show the timeline just cracking and all of the colors and everything. And she's just sitting on the ground like, was it worth it? And, you're wondering the same thing too. But again, when you rewatch, you're like, oh, yeah, it was totally worth it, because now we get all these timelines. But yeah, and then seeing Loki there again on that first watch, I was like, that's really cool of her to just send him right back to see Mobius. Like, she's got plans. And then I was like, oh no.
So we'll get to it. But think about this question. Do you think she sent him back to the same TVA? Do you think she thought she sent him back to the same TVA? Maya, she kills He Who Remains, and that wink and see you soon. It was awesome.
It was amazing. I honestly, though, like, everything after this, I have no idea, and I'm so curious to see what y'all say, because I was so thrown off about where Loki, everything like that. But that see you soon it gave me chills, because it's like, wow, we're really going to see so many different versions of him, and he could pop up anywhere in any of the projects that we see. So it was a really great last bit of the episode.
Cara, we were having conversations about this episode, and we came across multiple people trying to make excuses for Sylvie and the decision that she made, and you weren't having it.
No, because come on. We have spent 10 years watching poor Loki grow and then die, and then grow and then die. And then this time he gets the best growth possible, and he finally comes to terms with the fact that he doesn't have to be alone. He can be loved.
He literally puts his neck on the line. Literally.
Yes, and the first person that he has this trust with literally stabs him in the back and sends him away and breaks his heart. And now we have to go through all that damage again. But yeah, I wasn't having it. I have, unlike Maya and Alex, I have really liked Loki since the beginning. He's been one of my favorite characters. So I just want him to have a win.
You just want him to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Where's somebody putting their neck on the line for him and being like, I just want you to be happy. Come on.
Well, Rob, he does go back to the TVA, and Mobius and B-15. We see one version of them staring at the sacred timeline and all the branches upon branches upon branches that have redlined, and they say there's no turning back now. I'm 100% convinced that this is the Mobius and the B-15 that we have seen throughout this series, that it makes the most sense because they're not that worried about it. This clearly is having the same effect in this other TVA, because they say it's got 63 different branches. What are they supposed to do? And they're talking about he, and we know that it's Kang the Conqueror. Moshi believes it to be Immortus, but it's a statue of a variant of Kang. I believe it is the Kang the Conqueror that we're going to get in Quantumania. That is the Timekeeper, and he's got his own statue. What do you make of all of the way this episode ended, Rob?
So I'm going to unpack a couple of things here. First of all, that scene was added last minute when they found out there was a season 2. So if it seems like it might be a little sloppy or not make sense, it might. They might not have the whole story where it's going. So they just tried to put something out there to keep it going. I also partially believe that this version of Kang, whatever they gave to Judge Renslayer, may have been something for her to go back and give to an earlier version of himself or something on how to recreate the TVA, maybe make it better, maybe make it stronger, maybe make him more powerful. We also don't know if other versions of Kang are necessarily going to be Jonathan Majors. Every Loki wasn't Tom Hiddleston, so why would we assume that every Kang is going to be Jonathan Majors? So this maybe
looked strikingly like Jonathan Majors.
Oh no, it did. That was definitely Jonathan Majors in the pic. Whether it was the same one we saw at the end or a different version or the worst version, we don't know how that's going to go. Why they don't have memory of Loki? I'm assuming it just went back to a different time, either a different multiverse or a different timeline or something where we don't totally know it's him. So is it confusing? Yeah, it is that is a little bit confusing. That's one of the biggest things I need to see how they unpack, which I assume they're going to do in season 2, but we also don't know when we're going to get season 2. Is season 2 going to be next summer? Is it going to be the summer after? Could it be after Ant-Man and Wasp? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be after Ant-Man, but as far as what else to make of it, it's really anyone's guess because we don't know what version of the TVA they actually went back to and what's been going on in that reality.
The Blurred Hulk says, and he kind of voices the opinion that I have, that it's possibly the same TVA taken over by Kang with the variants just simply reset. It would make a ton of sense, reminiscent of Planet of the Apes and the Statue of Liberty reveal. That seems to make the most sense. I do think no matter how many timelines we've got, it wouldn't make a ton of sense to have multiple varying TVAs that look exactly the same. So I'm of the belief that it's still the one TVA and it just kind of started from scratch. But Alex, what did you make of this final scene?
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack in this final scene. And the first thing I'll say is I have no idea. And I really like that I have no idea. Like I like going into this new season with just the most wild expectations of it. But when I was thinking about it and unpacking it, taking out the statue portion of it, the one thing is we don't know a lot about the TVA still. There's still a lot we don't know. All we know is time works differently there. And then we know when they looked out at the TVA, it's this vast thing. And so what I'd always said was like, it's more than just these guys, right? Like there's got to be more judges. There can't just be one judge who does the entire thing. So maybe there's like they said, there's units where there's different units handling different things. And I had posited that there's like a Mobius in every unit. There's a B-15 in every unit. Maybe. But again, even with that, then you've got the Kang statue and that doesn't make sense. So like that whole theory goes out the window. But I had assumed that maybe he got sent somewhere else. And I think so because of the temp pad that He Who Remains has. So it's different than the TVA's temp pad. So maybe he did get sent to a different universe because regardless, they're still having a branched realities there, the 63 realities that have changed in that unit. Like they're going through the same thing that everyone else is going through. So it wouldn't make sense that Kang just popped up and took over already. But again, that's like where it all hits for me. I can't go any further than that because I don't know.
Yeah, David says the TVA now knows that Lokis can hide in apocalypses, so presumably they would have all been caught before they wouldn't know that is. So I mean, yeah, I mean they tipped Sylvie's hand for sure. Rob, you talked about when's the next time we're going to see this? Is it going to be pre-Quantumania, post-Quantumania? If I were betting, especially with everything that they have coming in 2022, I don't think we get season 2 until after Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which is currently slated for February of 2023. Had they filmed season 2 while they were filming season 1, then maybe I could see it. But now, I mean, they're changing directors. Obviously, it's going to have been written. All the characters are say they're back in, but they're changing directors. Marvel's putting a lot of resources into at least She-Hulk, Moon Knight. They just hired a director today for Blade. They've got a lot of hands in the fire, and we'll see. If I had to bet, if you asked me right now, post or pre Quantumania in February of 2023, I think it's going to be after that, personally.
And all those shows that you just mentioned, those characters all play major roles in Secret Wars, where I think is where this is heading. So that's what's going to happen. And I think Kang is still going to be a major villain in Secret Wars, I think, which means the Kang we're going to get in Quantumania might not even be the main Kang. You know, that's a crazy thought too in my brain if that's the case.
I mean, if we're ever going to get a main Kang, that's the right time to bring him in. Kevin says that he thinks it's going to be January of 23, leading in straight into Quantumania. I could see that. That would make a ton of sense. Dwayne says Back to the Future 2, season 2. Cara, I would assume you were surprised as everybody else that Mobius and B-15 were surprised or didn't know who Loki was, but how did you experience this last scene?
Yeah, that was a surprise. It was also really heartbreaking to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, he went in there taking the blame, and I thought that was really telling of his growth as well, because it wasn't him that unleashed all of this. It was Sylvie that did it, and he came back and basically said, like, we've made a horrible mistake. We've unleashed all of this. So I thought that was nice of him, pretty mature compared to what we've seen of him in the past. But yeah, it was tough to watch them be like, who are you? And his acting when he's, on the captions it says shudders as he's looking out like that. I felt that. I felt like when Alex was saying that his tempad was different and that's why he went somewhere else. That's kind of how I took it as well, that she sent him to whatever was the universe that Kang or he who shall remains had on his tempad last, because she didn't have enough time to like choose one, right? And he was talking about how all the Kangs are so narcissistic and they're all about themselves and blah blah blah. So sending him to a timeline in which he is the main statue and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of how I took that.
And who knows if he's just all gloves are off now, no more fake timekeepers that he has to simply voice an animatronic. Like, how ruthless is he going to be? Maya, how did you experience this final scene?
Yeah, it made me wonder, like, if the Kangs that we're going to see in the future are all going to be evil. Granted, I mean, people were predicting that he's the next big bad, and I mean, in definitely stories he's going to have to be bad. But we may see that there may be some storylines where he just has different motivations, maybe. It's interesting, too, when we see all the different variants of Loki. Everyone has completely different stories, completely different motivations and lifestyles. And I know he said that all the Kangs are learning the same thing at the same time about the timeline and everything like that. But doesn't mean they use that information in the same way. Obviously. So I'm just curious to know that, are we only going to see bad Kangs? So that was like a question I have left at the end of the season. Because I'm curious to know, are we only going to just see one, multiple, how many array of characters? Because you've had obviously like this benchmark of various Lokis and how everyone is so different. So yeah, that's just outstanding question I had. But I really liked just the question at the end of like, where is this going next? Where is everyone? There is no bookend on any any character that we saw in this last episode. So everything is open for grabs, and it's just kind of weird to think like the next live action is like Miss Marvel, right? Series, right?
Yeah, series, yeah. Shang-Chi and potentially Eternal be before that.
Right. So it's just like, gosh, we have so many grounded stories. Like, it's gonna be so weird to think like timeline, Kang, and then young girl in New Jersey. But I'm excited. Like, just the doors are open. There's so much to explore, and just seeing like how where everything goes is really exciting. I absolutely adore this series. Definitely my favorite one of the three so far.
I am a little bit bummed that I thought right after the events of Loki, we'd finally get what information we needed to get a trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home. But Kevin, we are still sitting here waiting on the trailer that you said to expect. Sebastian says that The Empire Strikes Back and The Dark Knight don't end exactly on a happy note, but they succeed because they make you feel deeply. and he loved the ending. Sebastian did not care for the ending of WandaVision, if I remember correctly. So I'm glad we got one that Sebastian really, really liked. It sounds like it's definitely his favorite of the 3 series. Maya said this is her favorite of the 3 series. Rob, where does this fall into the Disney Plus series? WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Loki. Where does
this is my favorite of the 3 too. My order is Loki, WandaVision, Falcon, Winter Soldier. This one, like I said, it propelled things forward more than anything else so far. So that's why I enjoyed it the most. Very simply,
it definitely propelled things. Cara, how about you?
You know that I loved Falcon and the Winter Soldier the most. That I feel like that's going to be true for a long time. But Loki is my second favorite. Blew WandaVision out of the water for me.
Can you share with those that don't know why you liked Falcon and Winter Soldier so much?
Oh man, okay, well, first there's several reasons. Bucky is one of them. I know that's the answer you're looking for. But that's
all right.
Lots of other reasons though.
Alex, where does this one rank for you?
Yeah, I've taken the easy way out to say that WandaVision is my favorite Marvel miniseries, and Loki is my favorite season of TV right now. But if I had to pick, yes, Loki is my favorite with WandaVision in second place.
I love WandaVision. I love the entire experience that came around WandaVision. It brought the MCU back and better than ever. But it's like you said, Rob, like this one propels that story. WandaVision got 23 Emmy nominations that I'm so excited about. Kevin says he can guarantee that there will be a trailer between now and December 17th. So way to go out on a limb there, Kevin.
But honestly, in my opinion, they don't need to rush a Spider-Man trailer. We're all going to see it. Everybody's going to see it. It's Spider-Man. If Spider-Man does anything, we're going. Like, that's just what it is. Spider-Man's probably the favorite superhero of everybody of all time. It's just that's that character. So I wish they would actually not give a trailer. I would love, for the first time in history, we give no movie trailer, open the date, and you want to know what? It's going to break records.
Now you're speaking me and Alex language.
Mine too, because Marvel is going insane with these trailers. Like, I know Black Widow was in a category of its own in terms of runway, but I'm so sick of seeing everything.
I shouldn't say this, but I finally had to turn off Twitter alert for Marvel Studios because I can't get any more tweets telling me to go see Black Widow. I can't do it. And Dwayne says he feels that the rollout is going to be critical for the future projects of the multiverse, worried that COVID issues globally could cause a delay in one project that might require delays in more. Kevin Feige's a super smart dude. This series was supposed to come out after Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, had everything come out on time. We don't know how stories were impacted. They have options. They have smart brains in-house to make those decisions. Patrick says, I'm not sure that all the future Marvel projects will have connection to Kang, just like not everyone in the first 3 phases had Thanos. Do not expect Kang to have a connection in every single project. I don't see how Kang, this could be the reason. Now I've seen it going around that people are super confident that the events that brought out the Eternals was not Thanos, that it was the multiversal war. That's possible, but don't bank on the Eternals having anything to do with the multiverse either. We could very well spend multiple projects within a single timeline, and that's just how it's going to be. But I do trust Marvel that they'll make the right decisions and that they won't contradict themselves, and they'll know how to, how should I put this? I mean, maybe not politely, but they won't have a character that can fly in 1984 and then not fly 35 years in a black and white movie. But overall, I trust Kevin Feige. I trust in Marvel Studios. Alex, just your overall thoughts on the Loki series and everything. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it puts us in such an exciting spot and opens up so many doors. And I would caution everybody too, because I know we get so excited when these shows come out of that expectation piece. I could easily see, at the end of Spider-Man and the end of Doctor Strange, you see, the multiverse is starting to collapse or is starting to break off. Because if you remember, like in Doctor Strange 1, the Ancient One sends him through the multiverse and no one comes to prune them. So like they can travel between the multiverse fine. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's nothing about Loki in either of those movies, and we are still getting these small teases going forward. At the same time, they could throw something in there and, we would scream our heads off. But I think it really positioned itself of being kind of an all-timer in a sense of, I think it's going to get better and better as time goes on. Once whatever happens in 10 years, Secret Wars, whatever it ends up being, like we're going to look back on this season and be like, wow, this set up so much with so little too, of it only being 6 episodes. And even with, I sort of agree about episode 3 too. Like I love them all, but when I'm doing rewatches, that one does kind of come to a halt. And even with that though, it's still an incredible season. So like they did so much with so little. And again, that's CGI. Like it felt like you're watching a movie every week. So I'm very grateful to be alive right now.
I will go with Ted Lasso season 1 at the top, WandaVision right below that, and then Loki right just barely below that. But if
a true multiverse.
Tune into United We Fan. This week we did an episode about Ted Lasso, Earth's Mightiest Weirdos. Like I said, if you can't keep your multiverse straight, stick with us. We're going to be able to keep that multiverse straight. I am proud of us. We did this in an hour. I'm very, very proud of us. We will end this with Blurred Hulk saying maybe Ralph Boner actually is a Quicksilver or Pietro variant after all. Cara, Alex, Maya, thank you so much for joining us. Rob, it was good to have you back, man.
Dude, I missed it. I hate not doing this show. This is my favorite thing of the week, I think. I could talk Marvel all day.
We have just a couple weeks off. What If will be back on will be appearing on August 11th. We will be back every Monday night. I don't know what we're going to talk about next Monday, but we will figure it out, and then we are going to stick with What If. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, for all time.
Always.
Always.